Well, that was a little bit unexpected, wasn't it? I think that I'm one of many reviewers this week that expected to be sitting down for their weekly Series 12 review to be taking a look at another rather run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story featuring the return of the Judoon, no doubt tracking down, say, a prisoner that has escaped and is currently hiding on planet Earth. However, this episode is certainly a little bit more than that, as today, of course, I'm going to be taking a look at the most recent episode from Doctor Who Series 12, which is Fugitive of the Judoon, as written by Vinay Patel alongside Chris Chibnall in a co-writing format, which is, I do believe, the first of this series. Now, I did in fact mention in the previous review that I was going to try and be a bit quicker this time round and review the episode earlier on in the week. It turns out, little did I know, this week would in fact be rather busy for the channel. I think I've been uploading at least 3 or 4 reviews by this point, so once again the Series 12 review has found itself at the back end of the week, which is okay, of course, because I've had a few decent videos to do, and quite frankly videos that I've had more interest in doing. And I think that especially in the case of this story, this was one that I wanted to let sit and simmer for a little bit, because I've kind of been put off doing first reaction videos to Doctor Who stories, especially when they've just broadcast, because normally you see all of the good things that happen within a story and all the shock moments, and you don't necessarily take in time to rethink what actually occurs within the episode itself and kind of criticise it. So here we are a few days later, rewatched the story along with a number of different scenes, and I suppose this video is going to be a rather bumpy ride. I'm going to try and leave all of the stuff that obviously I'm referring to, the Ruth Doctor, until the very end, and kind of approach this review in a chronological order. We do, of course, have the return of the Judoon, which is incredibly exciting. I think it will be fair to say that they are one of the most important and successful monsters that have been created within new series Doctor Who, along with the Weeping Angels, and they haven't really had many stories, so it is nice to see them back. And we do, of course, have Nicholas Briggs once again voicing them. He does a very good job. I really do love the approach of the Judoon within this story, being a lot more practical. Of course, they've been contracted out to commit a certain task, and we do, of course, have the rather brilliant Captain Judoon, named Paul Condon, which is a lovely tribute to a Doctor Who fan that sadly passed away within the later half of 2019, which is a lovely way to reference him within a Doctor Who story. And I think from what I could tell, the masks of the Judoon have in fact been upgraded this story round. The actual facial expression and everything about the mask itself did seem to be a bit more upgraded compared to the previous appearances of the Judoon within new series Doctor Who. Of course, I love the format of the very beginning scene, the way that we have the Judoon bounding into the situation, and we had that rather brilliantly directed shot of the spaceship itself. I love the fact that we've got an insight into the actual Judoon spaceship, having previously seen it, of course, within CGI, within Smith & Jones. It's nice to get a look inside the ship itself, and the first thing that I've seen from the Judoon in this episode is how powerful and threatening they are. I feel like a force that needs to be dealt with and could pose a decent threat to the Doctor, especially through misunderstanding, considering that they are trigger-happy police. And I think that the way they approached the invasion of Earth as well was very fun. Of course, it is essentially the invasion of Gloucester, but I think that it worked very well. I thought that it looked nice. I loved the comedic moments, and I loved the introduction of Ruth within the scene prior to this. It was a nice and warm way to introduce the story itself, and I love the fact that now, looking back, having known the ending of this story, it provides a little bit additional context and a few nice references that have been put in there as well, which has the shape of the windows within Ruth's flat looking very similar to that of a TARDIS. Of course, the mysterious goings-on with her husband. Of course, one of the interesting things with the early half of this story is that the TARDIS team has almost gone back to what we've seen within episodes 1, 2 and 3, where we had that rather large divide starting to form within the family within the TARDIS. So we do, of course, have Yaz, Ryan and Graham noticing that the 13th Doctor feels a little bit more detached from usual, and it is nice to see her once again delivering blunt scenes. However, at the same time, it does make the Nikola Tesla episode last week seem a little bit unusual and out of place, because there wasn't really any references to that within that story. So it's been nice to have a few nods within the previous episode just to make that theme consistent throughout the entirety of the series. Of course, we have her discussing her main idea that she is tracking down the Master after him previously being cast away to the Kasavin sort of dimension as seen within Spyfall, and it is nice to also have those additional references to Gallifrey as well, leading to this general plot arc that the series is focused on. Talking about the TARDIS team as well, it's nice to see that once again Yaz is doing some things that relate to her actual career path, being a policewoman. This is now the second or third time that we've seen this throughout this series, so it's great to see that they are definitely developing her. And once again, I found her rather enjoyable, I'm not going to lie. She was more of, once again, as I referred to in the previous review, kind of a stereotypical new series companion template. She didn't really offer too much more than what I would expect from a new series companion. However, within Series 11, she didn't really even have that, even compared to the other companions as well. None of them really felt as real as the previous companions within new series Doctor Who, so it's nice to see her having a bit more emotion, and more importantly, something to do. We have Ryan, as portrayed by Torsten Cole, which he once again had a few nice moments. He's a likeable character, however he didn't really have too much to do. Once again, he's the companion that is kind of left with the last role, and quite often, more than often, doesn't really have anything to contribute to the actual story itself. We have Graham, which once again Bradley Walsh portrays a nice and realistic grandfatherly figure, and out of the entirety of the TARDIS team, he is the character that feels the most real. However, at this point, I would maybe like to see them throwing in a few new things for Graham to do, because perhaps by this point, sort of 1.5 series in, we've kind of seen enough of this grandfatherly figure, and I would like to see them do more with him. I'm in fact going to move on to the TARDIS team in a second, in a different context, due to of course the returning character within this story. However, before we go into that, talking about the 13th Doctor herself, once again, Jodie Whittaker. Interesting. Once again, I think that Jodie Whittaker has definitely improved vastly throughout the entirety of this series, and this is much like the previous story within the Nikola Tesla episode. She felt like she was doing a good job, and the thing that I noticed within Series 11 is that I felt you could tell she was acting. It kind of suspended the belief of this being a mysterious science fiction TV show, because it felt like actors acting, and it didn't really feel like real people. This series, the 13th Doctor, has started to develop, to see the reintroduction of the darker themes, as I have previously mentioned, sort of suggesting a little bit of a 7th Doctor character arc, where we started off with a light and happy Doctor, and then we leaned to that more dark and mysterious side, seen throughout Season 25 and 26, which, funnily enough, they have of course just released the Blu-ray for Season 26, which I highly recommend buying because it is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm currently watching it at the minute, and you can kind of see some similarities between the 7th Doctor and the 13th Doctor. She's mysterious, she's hiding her past, not quite sure why, but she's just a little bit disconnected from the TARDIS team, and as I've mentioned, that is kind of causing ripples, and it is nice to see that once again, Jodie is given something to do. I've kind of, by this point, considering that Vinay Patel did write for the previous series, of course Demons of the Punjab, I'm starting to think that maybe the last series, the writers didn't really know what to do with this new Doctor, and now that we've had a whole series of different writers writing her, and now some of those writers have returned, they're kind of more used to writing for this character now. They kind of know where they're going with the character itself, or maybe even they've actually been given some direction this time round to make a character feel more consistent and real, because that is certainly a vibe that I'm getting from this series. Because I can't hide it any further, John Barrowman is back as Captain Jack Harkness, a rumour that did start to circulate, I do believe a day before the episode aired, because he did of course retweet the thing on Twitter that the Doctor Who official site put up saying you won't believe what happens next week, and I must admit, me and my dad had quite an in-depth conversation about this, because apparently Captain Jack is not returning for the rest of this season. Apparently Chibnall has said that somewhere. I may try and find a link to the article. I read it on Twitter, so I do not know how accurate that source is. However, apparently he is not returning, which raises a bit of a flaw and a criticism, in my opinion. It's lovely to see Jack back, especially after Big Finish developing him. It's nice to see John Barrowman's face back in Doctor Who. He's a fun and lovable character that people adore, so it only makes sense to bring him back. However, considering he's apparently not coming back for the rest of this season, and acting as if he's not going to come back for the rest of this season, this was quite obviously an attention-grabbing thing to show fan service, which normally I would be fine with. However, because they've just shoved him in, especially in the context within this story, it just feels a bit unnecessary, because he didn't meet the 13th Doctor. He didn't do anything with the 13th Doctor. He didn't really directly contribute to the plot itself at all. However, we have him being introduced to the TARDIS team, and it makes me think, and this is me going out on a whim, and as I say, I was discussing this with my dad because he was quite intrigued as to why they've brought the character back, naturally not being connected to Doctor Who via social media. He doesn't follow it, so I was kind of giving my perspective, and he was giving his perspective as somebody who just watches it normally when I'm there, because I watch it and he'll watch it too. He sort of thought that it was odd that he was in a scene that was just the companions and him. And I must admit, it does make sense, and it kind of feels like they've wrote it in last minute. It feels like Vinay Patel originally had another idea for Ryan, Yaz and Graham, and originally they were intended to be teleported away to do something else. Perhaps they were maybe put in prison within the Judoon spaceship or something like that, because they've travelled to Earth via a spaceship from outer space. It is tech that shouldn't belong on Earth. Maybe something like that involves them being imprisoned within the Judoon spaceship. Therefore, they are out of action for the rest of the story. That could have been a potential route to go down. However, we have this John Barrowman thing instead, which, as I say, makes me think that something originally was meant to happen in the story that then got written out entirely and replaced with these series of sequences with John Barrowman in this rather odd-looking spaceship. I'm not going to lie, I'm more inclined to go down that route, that it was just a thing to drag in the audience and then to introduce this plot arc thing with, of course, the lone Cyberman, which we'll get onto once again in a little bit. But John Barrowman, he was fun, it was nice to see him back, as I say, but at this current time, in my eyes, he has to come back again in order to give this scene any substance and worth at all. And considering that it was all set within one location as well, that is something else that didn't ring true for me. It kind of once again felt like it was crowbarred in last minute. The other thing that I'm going to presume with this story is that originally Vinay Patel was going to write a Judoon story that I referred to at the very start of this review, being a run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story where a monster has come to Earth and the Judoon need to track it down, basically Smith and Jones, but on Earth. However, I kind of feel like that plot was sidelined. I feel like Chris Chibnall's seen the plot for this story and I was like, that is great, let's do this, let's bring back the Judoon. Clearly the lack in any pre-existing characters returning within Series 11 was arguably one of the main flaws of that series. However, maybe then Chris Chibnall decided to add on this whole extra layer, including the Ruth Doctor and of course the latter half of this story, to then give it more padding. And yes, admittedly it makes the story more dramatic, however it kind of, as I say, sidelines that original Judoon plot and makes it feel rather insignificant. Aware that so far this review I've mentioned quite a lot of criticisms, and I'd just like to address now, that doesn't mean that I don't like this story. I did enjoy this story. I arguably like this story more on second watch because I knew what was coming at the very end and I could spot a few references here and there that have been subtly added in. I loved the return of the Judoon and I thought that it was nice to see them back on TV again. I think the way that Vinay Patel written them was absolutely superb. As I've mentioned, they feel like a threat, they feel like a decent monster to go up against the 13th Doctor, and I love the fact that we've had some development of their race as an actual species. However, at the same time, and one of the main things that I've taken from this series so far is that I actually feel like I'm involved within the plot. I feel like I watch the story and then I will be thinking about it for at least the next day. I will be going about trying to work out theories for the Ruth Doctor, trying to figure out what is going on, reflecting on the actual story itself, which is far more than what Series 11 did for me, because Series 11 arguably did nothing. I watched it, I enjoyed some of it, I didn't really want to think about it after it. I didn't want to go out of my way and think about what the series was doing, where it was taking the characters, because in my eyes it was nothing special. The thing that is standing out to me so far for Series 12 is that it is provoking a reaction, it is provoking theories, and it is provoking speculation with fans on Twitter, and that is a brilliant thing, as opposed to people just giving mini reviews of the story, and that was pretty much it, compared to Series 11 last time. This time round we have people trying to figure out what is going on, what's happening with Gallifrey, Gallifrey? Is she from our universe? Is the new master from our universe? It is provoking a reaction, and that is brilliant. But that is not to say that there's not flaws within this plot. I personally think there is several flaws within this story, such as what I've previously mentioned. It feels like that the plot arc of this series has sidelined the Judoon plot within the early half. Originally, I think it was very clear that this story was going to be a separate story in its own right. Because of us having that introduction of a plot arc within the series once more, it is edging towards that Series 6 territory, where the series itself relies way too much on that plot arc, and the plot arc is essential to your enjoyment of that series as a whole, which is a step completely in the opposite direction compared to Series 11, which I think is a bold move, and it's not to say that I don't entirely like it. Arguably, I would have loved to see more of the Judoon, I won't lie. However, I wasn't entirely put off by the Ruth Doctor reveal thing at the end. Once again, that provoked reaction and theory and excitement. I thought, what was going to happen after this? And once again, very much like Spyfall and the concept of Gallifrey mentioned within that story, it is all leading up to something, and it is fair enough having these different plot points, having this possible speculation of what is going to happen next. However, the main issue is how is it going to be resolved, and more importantly, is that climax going to be worth the build-up that is currently happening? Because at the minute, I think that Chibnall is risking creating this tense build-up to something that in reality isn't going to be that special whatsoever. So talk about the Ruth Doctor, because that is probably what you're all here for, because it's the main focus of the story, and sadly the rest of the episode itself does seem to be overshadowed. The actual moment where she remembers, it's basically, the whole episode is kind of an earthbound take on Utopia. You have this Time Lord that believes they're somebody else. They eventually, within the final act, find out that they are indeed that somebody else, and it is all revealed, and we have a massive ending and loads of things happening within the last 10 minutes. It's a good build-up, and it's something that certainly I didn't expect within the first watch, and it was a shock. I loved that shock. However, it was oddly approached. The actual moment itself was wonderfully directed. Segan Aknola's music score was flawless. I love the moment where she digged away the earth to reveal the police box signage. I thought that was gorgeous, and the moment she turned round and the Ruth Doctor was stood there, she instantly felt like a powerful Time Lord. Not necessarily the Doctor, but she felt like a powerful force and a presence that arguably even the 13th Doctor lacked in within the previous series, solely because of the way that she has been written. The costume itself was also quite nice. I was kind of getting 6th Doctor vibes of obviously the tasteless shirt underneath a rather almost Edwardian looking costume, and I think that the actual actress herself, I do believe Jo Martin, she was phenomenal. Once again, I thought that she basically grabbed the opportunity with both hands and absolutely ripped the scenery apart. She was the main focus of that scene. You were looking directly at her. She is a personality that is unusual, however. She doesn't feel entirely doctorly, which makes some people suggest that she might be an early incarnation of the Doctor, possibly even before Hartnell, which that has caused some criticisms. Personally, I do not believe that is the case. I hope it's not the case, but I do not believe it anyway. I think that it's going to be something else entirely. My original theory that she was going to be an unbound Doctor from another universe, which I would have loved, and it would be basically entirely copying of Big Finish and the Unbound universe and the most recent New Adventures of Bernie Summerfield series, which for those of you that watch those reviews, you will know how much I like that series, so that is quite a compliment. And to be honest, if we were to have any Unbound Doctor with a new series televised Doctor Who, I would want it to be David Warner, I can't lie. However, I appreciated the concept. I thought that if it was anything like that, it would be quite experimental for new series Doctor Who, and I do not expect it from new series Doctor Who, so once again it is good to have that unexpected thing happening, as opposed to having a standard structured story that is probably going to be quite boring. However, her personality did suggest something a bit different. Part of me was feeling maybe she is a bit more of an early, harsher version of the Doctor, a bit more like Hartnell, and arguably like the 2nd and 3rd Doctor at times. Part of me was also thinking the Valeyard, and I know that there is this awful trope of people instantly when we have the mysteries occurring within new series Doctor Who. It's either Susan, Omega or Valeyard. It's one of the three. It's always one of the three. However, considering that she did have a few darker moments, wouldn't it be quite cool if it was the Valeyard under a guise, and because she's a female and Jodie is a female, it would make sense for the Valeyard for the Doctor in this incarnation to be a female as well. Who knows? Also at the same time, I did maybe think that due to the events of Gallifrey and Gallifrey being nuked or burnt to a crisp, whatever the Master did to it allegedly, maybe that is a sheer apocalyptic event that somehow has ripped apart the time streams, because the 13th Doctor does say that time seems to be swirling around me, or something like that. Maybe that is such a grand and big event that has ripped time together, like the Time War, and that has in itself caused an alternative version of the 13th Doctor. So maybe there is two versions of the 13th Doctor from a different route entirely. So maybe the 12th Doctor regenerated into Ruth in one time stream, and then another she regenerated into Jodie, the true time stream, or something like that. I'm mainly theorising on what it could possibly be. However, part of me doesn't want her to be a proper incarnation. I know that Chibnall has said she definitely is the Doctor. All of the theories I've just said would still entail that she is, in theory, still the Doctor, just not the one from the actual proper timeline within the series itself. Essentially, maybe she's an accident that occurred, and then now she's living this much harsher and darker life, and maybe they could need to sacrifice this incarnation somehow within maybe the later half of this series, or maybe even beyond into series 13. Who knows how long this plot arc will last. I think that pretty much summarises my review of Fugitive of the Judoon, and upon reflection it makes me think how reliant this story actually is on the plot. It is very much a Face the Raven scenario, where looking back now, when you watch Face the Raven, it is kind of undermined by Hellbent because of the bringing back of Clara, and I worry that a very similar thing is going to happen with this story, where it's going to be excellent at this current point in time. However, the future events within the series and or beyond will compromise how good that this story is, essentially because of a crap conclusion that didn't really live up to what is currently being hyped. What did you think of this story? Why not leave it in the comments section below, or maybe even more importantly, given that it is this story, why not leave your theories? Who is the Ruth Doctor? Where is she within the incarnation cycle? Is she even within the incarnation cycle itself? Is she a future incarnation that has had her mind wiped? Is she one from before Doctor Who? It started with William Hartnell, because you have these whole plot arc theories as well of the original beginnings as seen within Spyfall and the different sort of creators of Gallifrey or whatever. What are your theories? I will be interested to know. Leave them in the comments section below, along with your general opinion of this story. And since this review is drawing to a close, I suppose it's only time to take a look at the Doctor Who Series 12 rankings. So far at number 1 we have Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, number 2 we have Spyfall Part 2, and number 3 we have Spyfall Part 1, and at number 4 we have Orphan 55. Therefore I've concluded that this series currently stands within the ranking. At number 1 is still Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and Fugitive of the Judoon comes in at number 3. Therefore I thought that Spyfall Part 2 was in fact better than this story. However, it does overtake Spyfall Part 1 and Orphan 55 that still remains there at the very bottom. And I think that the beauty of this ranking, I suppose, and doing it on a weekly basis, is that the upcoming events of the series could essentially contort my opinion of these stories, in particular Spyfall and Fugitive of the Judoon being more plot arc reliant. So possibly some things might happen within this season undermines Fugitive of the Judoon, maybe makes me want to lower it within my ranking now that the appreciation has kind of been decreased due to an upcoming event perhaps within this series. But I put it there because it's fun, it's enjoyable, I love the Judoon aspects of the story, I love the concept of the Ruth Doctor, and to be honest the TARDIS interior itself is one of the best actual sets that has been created for Doctor Who in quite a long time. We've now had several TARDIS consoles that don't belong to the actual current Doctor that have appeared within the TV show. They're arguably better or just as nice as the current TARDIS console room. This one for the Ruth Doctor I absolutely adored, and I like it more than the current 13th Doctor TARDIS, although that one is growing on me. And yeah, I thought the characters were okay. I just wonder where this series is going to go next, and if it is going to affect my overall opinion of these stories so far. And I suppose that is the end of another Doctor Who Series 12 episode review. I hope you have enjoyed it. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I did originally intend for it to be earlier on in the week. It's now later on in the week, simply down to the other things that I've been reviewing, so I'm not even going to attempt to comment on when the next review will be up. Hopefully it might be around Friday, the following week after the episode has aired, as per usual, as it seems to be. It just depends entirely on what the product reviews are for that week and what I am reviewing. For example, that Big Chief Earth Doctor over there arriving this week has kind of disrupted the Series 12 reviews, so yeah, it just depends. Either way, stay tuned. Sometime next week there will be a review of the next episode within Doctor Who Series 12, which is of course Praxeus, as written by Pete McTighe, who did of course originally write Kablam, so I'm very much looking forward to him returning. However, interestingly, according to the Doctor Who Series 12 Wikipedia page, which I know is not the most authoritative source ever, but it does say that that episode is also co-written by Chris Chibnall, so it makes me think, is it going to be a similar scenario to this week, where we have another episode of Doctor Who that seems just to be a little bit of a science fiction adventure, which in reality does in fact have some deeper plot arc related elements relating to Gallifrey, the Time Lords, this alternative version of the Doctor, and whatever else Doctor Who Series 12 decides to contribute to the Doctor Who universe. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I shall of course see you all next time. Bye for now.